She was auctioned while nursing her infant. Mountain Man bought them. No one separates a mother. The bitter wind cut through Dry Creek Junction like a knife, carrying with it the promise of another unforgiving winter. The year was 1867, and the small frontier town huddled against the Montana Territory's vast wilderness had already buried 12 souls since October, victims of starvation, disease, and the merciless cold that seeped through every crack and crevice. On this particular morning, a crowd gathered in the town square, their breath forming white clouds in the frigid air. They had come not for a celebration, but for something far more sinister. A human auction, sanctioned by the town council as a necessary measure to reduce the burden on the community's dwindling resources. Among those to be auctioned stood Mara Whitlow, 19 years old, her fuller figure now hunched against the cold as she clutched a small bundle wrapped in threadbare blankets. Inside that bundle, her 3-week-old daughter Rose slept fitfully, occasionally mewling with hunger. 3 weeks earlier, Mara's world had shattered when her husband, Thomas Whitlow, died in a mining accident. A support beam had given way in the Silver Creek mine, crushing him and 2 other men instantly. Thomas had been 22, strong and seemingly invincible, but the mountain had claimed him nonetheless, as it had claimed so many others. Mara had been 8.5 months pregnant when they buried Thomas in the frozen ground. His family, cold, calculating people who had never approved of their son's choice to marry that plump girl with no prospects, had made their position clear at the funeral. "You have 1 week to vacate the property," Thomas's father, Jeremiah Whitlow, had announced, his voice devoid of sympathy. "The house belongs to the Whitlow family, not to you. You brought nothing to this marriage, and you'll leave with nothing." Mara had tried to plead with them. "Please, I'm about to give birth. I have nowhere to go. Thomas would have wanted—" "Thomas is dead," Jeremiah's wife Constance interrupted sharply, "and we will not be burdened with feeding another useless mouth. You've already eaten us out of house and home with that appetite of yours." The cruelty of those words had struck Mara harder than any physical blow. All her life, she'd endured comments about her body. Too soft, too round, too much. Her mother had died when she was young, and her father, a failed farmer, had drunk himself to death when she was 16, leaving her an orphan. Thomas had been the first person to look at her with kindness, to tell her she was beautiful just as she was. And now he was gone. Mara had given birth alone in a drafty shed at the edge of town, with only old Maggie, a half-blind midwife, to help her. The labor had been long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. When Rose finally emerged, red-faced and screaming, Mara had wept, not from pain, but from the terrible knowledge that she had brought a child into a world where they had nothing and no one. Now, 3 weeks later, Mara stood on a wooden platform in the town square, her legs trembling, not just from the cold, but from exhaustion and terror. Rose was nursing beneath her shawl, her tiny mouth pulling desperately at Mara's breast. The milk came thin and insufficient. Mara hadn't eaten a proper meal in days. Mayor Douglas Pemberton stood beside her, a portly man with a waxed mustache and calculating eyes. He addressed the crowd in a booming voice that carried across the square. "Gentlemen of Dry Creek Junction, as you know, these are difficult times. Our town cannot afford to support those who cannot support themselves. This woman," he gestured dismissively at Mara, "is without husband, without property, and without means. She owes $18 in unpaid debts, courtesy of her late husband's failures. The town has generously decided to auction her contract of indenture. The winning bidder will own her labor for a period of 7 years, after which time her debt will be considered paid. Mara's stomach churned with nausea. 7 years. Rose would be 7 years old before Mara would be free again, if she survived that long. "What about the baby?" someone shouted from the crowd. Mayor Pemberton's expression soured. "The infant is included in the purchase. We are not monsters, gentlemen. The child is still nursing. However," his voice took on a sharper edge, "the buyer may dispose of the child as he sees fit after weaning. Many orphanages would gladly take a white infant, and the buyer could recoup some of his investment." "No!" Mara's voice cracked as she spoke, surprising even herself. "Please, you can't separate us. She's my baby. She needs me." "Silence!" Pemberton snapped. "You have no rights here, woman. You should be grateful we're not leaving you to freeze in the streets. Now then, shall we begin the bidding? Who will start at $5? The men in the crowd exchanged glances, some leering, others calculating. Mara recognized several of them: shopkeepers, ranch hands, the blacksmith's assistant. Each face represented a potential nightmare. $5, called out Vernon Stikes, a rancher known for his brutality toward his workers. "But I only want her for labor. I'll take the brat to the Sisters of Mercy in Helena as soon as it's weaned." Mara's heart seized. She clutched Rose tighter, and the baby let out a small cry of protest. $5 to Mr. Stikes. Do I hear 6? 6, shouted another voice, Abel Crockett, who owned the saloon. His reputation with women was well known and universally condemned, though never legally challenged. "I could use someone to clean and entertain the customers." Laughter rippled through the crowd, ugly and knowing. Mara felt bile rise in her throat. "That's $6 to Mr. Crockett. Do I hear 7? The bidding continued, each increment feeling like a nail in Mara's coffin. The price climbed to $8, then 9. She stood there, tears streaming down her face. Rose clutched to her chest like a life-preserver in a storm. And then a voice cut through the crowd like thunder. $50! The crowd fell silent, turning as one to locate the source of that deep, gravelly voice. Mara's eyes followed, and what she saw made her breath catch. Standing at the edge of the square was a man unlike any she had ever seen. He was massive, easily 6 feet 4 inches tall, with shoulders so broad they blocked the weak morning sun. His hair hung past his shoulders, a mixture of dark brown shot through with silver, and his beard was equally long and streaked with white. He wore buckskins that had seen years of hard use and a thick bearskin coat that made him look even larger. But it was his eyes that held Mara transfixed. They were pale gray, like ice on a winter river, and they looked directly at her with an intensity that made her shiver. $50, the man repeated, stepping forward. The crowd parted before him like water before a ship's prow. "I'll pay cash, right now." Mayor Pemberton's eyes widened with greed. $50 was more than 5 times the current bid, a fortune in these lean times. "Well now, mister, I don't believe I know your name, sir." "Cole Branson," the man said simply. He pulled a leather pouch from inside his coat and dropped it on the platform with a heavy clink. "Count it if you want. It's all there." Several people in the crowd began to murmur. Mara heard whispers. "That's the mountain man. Lives up in the Absarokas. Hasn't been down here in 5 years. killed a grizzly with just a knife. Pemberton's fingers trembled slightly as he opened the pouch and began counting the coins. When he finished, his face flushed with satisfaction. $50 exactly. Going once? Going twice? Wait! Vernon Stikes pushed forward. I want to know what he intends to do with them. We have a responsibility to this community to ensure. Cole Branson turned his cold gaze on Stikes, and the rancher's words died in his throat. When Cole spoke, his voice was low and deadly. What I do with my property is my business, but I'll tell you this. He looked around at the assembled crowd, his expression one of barely contained disgust. I won't be separating a mother from her child. That's something only devils do. He turned to Mayor Pemberton. We done here? Yes, of course. Sold to Mr. Cole Branson for $50. Pemberton banged his gavel with evident satisfaction. Cole walked up to the platform where Mara stood frozen. Up close, he was even more imposing, and she instinctively took a step back, clutching Rose tighter. His expression softened slightly. Can you walk? Mara nodded, not trusting her voice. Then come with me. We have a long journey ahead. Cole had 2 horses waiting at the edge of town, a large roan gelding and a smaller, gentler mare. He helped Mara onto the mare with surprising gentleness for such a large man, ensuring Rose was secure in her arms before mounting his own horse. They rode north, away from Dry Creek Junction, into the foothills of the Absaroka Mountains. For the first hour, neither spoke. Mara was too afraid, too exhausted, too confused. This man had paid a small fortune for her. For what purpose? Every man who had bid had made his intentions clear, whether for labor or worse. But Cole Branson had said nothing about what he expected from her. As the sun climbed higher, Rose began to fuss. Mara tried to quiet her, but the baby's cries only grew louder. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. She needs to nurse. Could we stop for a moment? Cole reined in his horse immediately and dismounted. There's a clearing just ahead, sheltered from the wind. We'll rest there. The clearing was surrounded by pine trees that blocked most of the bitter wind. Cole built a fire with practiced efficiency while Mara sat on a fallen log and fed Rose. She watched him warily, waiting for him to make some demand to reveal his true intentions. Instead, he pulled food from his saddlebags, dried venison, hardtack, and an apple that looked like precious gold in these lean times. He offered them to her without a word. Mara stared at the food, her mouth watering. What do you want from me? Cole looked at her, his gray eyes unreadable. Right now, I want you to eat. You look like you haven't had a decent meal in weeks, and the baby needs you strong. But why did you buy me? What do you expect me to do? He was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with something that might have been pain. I expect you to survive, to take care of your daughter, to live, that's all. I don't understand. You don't need to, not yet. Now eat. Mara ate, unable to help herself. The food was plain but filling, and she devoured every morsel. Rose, satisfied and warm from nursing, fell asleep in her arms. Only then did Mara allow herself to look at Cole Branson properly. He was older than she'd first thought, perhaps in his early 50s, though the weathered lines on his face made it hard to tell. His hands were large and scarred, the hands of someone who had lived a hard life. But there was something in the way he moved, the way he tended the fire and checked the horses, that spoke of competence and care. How far is your home? she asked hesitantly. 2 more days of riding. We'll camp tonight in a cave I know, sheltered and safe. Tomorrow we'll cross the high pass, and the day after that we'll reach my cabin. Have you lived there long? 20 years. Alone? Something flickered across his face. Pain, loss, grief. But it was gone so quickly she might have imagined it. Yes, alone. They rode on as the day waned, climbing higher into the mountains. The air grew colder and thinner, and snow began to fall in soft, fat flakes. Mara wrapped her shawl more tightly around Rose, terrified the baby would freeze. As if sensing her fear, Cole said, "Give me the child." "What? No, You're freezing and exhausted. If you fall from that horse, you'll both die. Give her to me. I'll keep her warm." Mara hesitated, every instinct screaming at her to refuse, but Rose was whimpering with cold, and Mara's arms were indeed trembling with exhaustion. Finally, she nodded. Cole dismounted and walked over to her. With infinite gentleness, he took Rose from her arms and tucked the baby inside his bearskin coat against his chest. Rose's cries stopped almost immediately, comforted by the warmth and the steady beat of his heart. "She'll be safe," Cole said, his voice oddly tender. "I promise." And somehow, impossibly, Mara believed him. They reached the cave just as full darkness fell. It was exactly as Cole had described, a deep, natural shelter carved into the mountainside, protected from wind and snow. Cole built a fire near the entrance, and soon the space was filled with flickering warmth. Mara sat with her back against the stone wall, Rose nursing contentedly. Her body ached with exhaustion, but she couldn't stop watching Cole as he moved about, preparing their camp with quiet efficiency. He laid out bedrolls, giving her the thicker, warmer one without comment, and heated water for tea made from some kind of root he carried in his pack. "You should sleep," he said, handing her a tin cup of the tea. "I'll keep watch." "Watch for what?" "Bears, mostly. Sometimes wolves. They come into caves in winter looking for shelter. But don't worry, they're more afraid of fire than we should be of them." Mara's eyes widened. "You expect me to sleep with bears nearby?" For the first time, Cole's lips quirked in what might have been a smile. "You're safer here than you were in that town. I promise you that." He was right, Mara realized. For all the dangers of the wilderness, at least here there were no men like Vernon Stikes or Abel Crockett. There was only this strange, silent man who had paid $50 for her freedom, or her captivity. She still wasn't entirely sure which. "Mr. Branson," she began hesitantly. "Cole, I need to understand. Why did you do this? Why did you buy me and Rose?" He stared into the fire for a long time, his expression distant. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with old pain. 22 years ago, I had a wife. Her name was Sarah. She was beautiful, kind, everything good in this world. We lived in a small town in Wyoming, and I worked as a farrier. We were happy." He paused, his jaw clenching. Mara waited, sensing that interrupting would shatter whatever fragile thing was allowing him to speak. "Sarah got pregnant. We were overjoyed. I built a cradle with my own hands, carved little horses into the wood. We had names picked out. Jacob, if it was a boy, Emma, if it was a girl. Sarah used to sit by the window, sewing little clothes, singing to the baby in her belly." His voice cracked slightly. "She went into labor early during a blizzard. The midwife couldn't get to us. I tried to help, but I didn't know what to do. Sarah labored for 2 days. The baby, Emma, she was born blue and silent. And Sarah, she bled too much. I couldn't stop it. I held them both as they died, my wife and my daughter, and I couldn't save either of them. Tears streamed down Mara's face. Cole, I'm so sorry. After that, I couldn't stay. Couldn't bear to see other families, other children, so I came up here, into the mountains, and I've been here ever since, alone, like I deserved to be. You didn't deserve that, Mara whispered. It wasn't your fault. Cole looked at her then, his gray eyes reflecting the firelight. Maybe not, but it happened anyway. And for 20 years I've lived with it. But today, when I came into town for supplies and saw you standing there, a mother with a newborn baby, being sold like cattle, knowing they planned to tear you apart. He stopped, his massive hands clenching into fists. I couldn't let it happen. I couldn't stand by and watch another mother lose her child, another child lose her mother, so I bought you, both of you, and I'll keep you safe for as long as you need. That's all. No obligations, no expectations, just safety. Mara's throat tightened with emotion. Thank you, she managed to say. Thank you. Cole nodded once, then turned away, his face hidden in shadow. Sleep now. Tomorrow's climb will be harder. Mara lay down on the bedroll, Rose tucked securely in her arms, and for the first time in weeks, she felt something other than terror. It wasn't quite hope, not yet, but it was close. 2 days later, they arrived at Cole's cabin. Mara had expected something crude and primitive, but what she found surprised her. The cabin was solidly built, with thick log walls and a stone chimney. It sat in a small clearing surrounded by towering pines, with a creek running nearby. Frozen now, but clear and beautiful. Inside the cabin was sparse but clean. There was a large stone fireplace, a sturdy table with 2 chairs, shelves lined with preserved foods and supplies, and a loft above with what appeared to be a sleeping area. Everything spoke of careful planning and meticulous maintenance. It's not much, Cole said, setting down their packs, but it's warm and secure. The walls are thick enough to keep out even the worst winter storms. It's wonderful, Mara said honestly. After weeks of sleeping in that freezing shed, the cabin seemed like a palace. Cole showed her around with few words. The loft would be hers, he explained. He would sleep downstairs by the fire. There were supplies, dried meat, grain, preserved vegetables, even some honey. Water could be melted from snow, or, when the creek thawed, drawn fresh. There was a small root cellar dug into the hillside behind the cabin, filled with stored potatoes, carrots, and turnips. You won't go hungry here, Cole said, and there's plenty of wood for the fire. You'll be comfortable. Over the next few days, they settled into an uneasy routine. Cole rose before dawn and spent his days hunting, checking his trap lines, and maintaining the property. Mara, still recovering from childbirth and weeks of near starvation, rested and cared for Rose. Cole brought fresh game, rabbit, venison, even a wild turkey, and Mara cooked, finding strength returning to her body as she ate regular meals. They spoke little at first, but gradually, tentatively, conversation began to flow. Mara told Cole about her life before, her lonely childhood, her brief happiness with Thomas, her terror at the auction. Cole listened without judgment, his gray eyes thoughtful. In turn, Cole spoke more about his past. He had been a soldier once, fighting in the war. He'd seen terrible things, done terrible things. After Sarah and Emma died, he couldn't bear to be around people anymore. The mountains had become his sanctuary, his prison, and his home all at once. "Don't you get lonely?" Mara asked one evening as they sat by the fire. Rose was asleep in the cradle Cole had brought down from the loft. The same cradle, Mara realized with a pang, that he had made for Emma 22 years ago. Yes, Cole admitted, but loneliness is better than the alternative. Or so I thought. And now? He looked at her, then at the sleeping baby. Now, I'm not so sure. Winter deepened, and with it, the isolation of their mountain home became absolute. Snow piled high against the cabin walls, and for days at a time, they were trapped inside. But strangely, Mara didn't mind. The cabin was warm, there was always food, and Rose was thriving, growing plumper and more alert every day. Cole continued to surprise her. Despite his rough exterior and years of solitude, he was remarkably gentle with Rose. He carved small toys for her, a rattle, a wooden bear, a small horse like those he'd once carved for his own daughter. He sang to her in a low, rumbling voice, old songs Mara didn't recognize, and when Rose cried in the night, Cole would wake and pace the floor with her, giving Mara precious hours of rest. "You're good with her," Mara said one morning, watching as Cole carefully changed Rose's diaper with the same focused attention he gave to skinning a deer. "Had practice?" he said gruffly. "Long time ago, but you don't forget." "She loves you," Mara said softly. "Look at how she watches you." It was true. Rose's eyes, beginning to focus, would track Cole's movements around the cabin. When he left to tend to the horses or check his traps, she would fuss until he returned. Cole's expression was complex. Joy and pain mingled together. "She's a good baby, strong, like her mother." The compliment made Mara flush. She wasn't used to being seen as strong. All her life, people had seen her as weak, useless, too fat to be of value. But here, in this isolated cabin, Cole seemed to see her differently. One particularly harsh blizzard trapped them inside for 5 days straight. The wind howled like a living thing, and snow piled so high against the door that Cole had to dig their way out each morning just to reach the woodpile. On the third day, the ceiling began to leak, and Cole spent hours in the freezing loft, patching the roof while Mara huddled by the fire with Rose. When he finally came down, his hands were blue with cold. Without thinking, Mara grabbed them and rubbed warmth back into them, chafing the rough skin between her own softer palms. "You'll get frostbite," she scolded. "You should have called me to help." "Couldn't let you and the baby get cold," Cole said, but he didn't pull his hands away. They stayed like that for a long moment, Mara holding Cole's hands, warming them. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, a recognition, an understanding. They were both broken people who had lost everything, but maybe, together, they could build something new. The moment was broken by Rose's cry. Mara released Cole's hands and went to tend to her daughter, but her heart was beating faster than it had in months. Spring came slowly to the mountains. The snow began to melt, revealing a world of green beneath. The creek unfroze, running fast and clear. Birds returned, filling the air with song, and with the thaw came visitors, unwelcome ones. Mara was hanging laundry outside the cabin when she heard horses approaching. Cole was checking his trap lines near the creek, too far away to hear. Her blood ran cold when she recognized the riders. Jeremiah Whitlow led the group, his face twisted with anger. Beside him rode Vernon Stykes and 2 other men Mara recognized from Dry Creek Junction. All were armed. "So this is where you've been hiding, girl?" Jeremiah said, dismounting. His eyes swept over the cabin with obvious contempt. living in sin with that savage in the mountains. What do you want?" Mara's voice trembled, but she stood her ground, positioning herself between the men and the cabin where Rose slept. "That baby," Jeremiah said flatly. "She's a Whitlow by blood. She belongs with her father's family, not up here in this godless wilderness. Rose is my daughter. You have no claim on her." Vernon Stikes laughed, a cruel sound. "You're an indentured servant, Mara. You have no rights. That mountain man might have bought you, but the law says a child can be taken from an unfit mother. And you, living up here, unmarried, with a man you're not wed to, you're about as unfit as they come. Please," Mara begged, hating how her voice cracked, "please don't take her. She's all I have." "Should have thought of that before you shamed the Whitlow name," Jeremiah said coldly. He gestured to one of the other men. "Samuel, go get the baby." Samuel dismounted and started toward the cabin. Mara screamed and threw herself in front of the door, but Stikes grabbed her and threw her aside. She hit the ground hard. The breath knocked from her lungs. And then a voice like thunder rolled across the clearing. "Touch that baby, and you're a dead man." Cole emerged from the tree line, his rifle leveled at Samuel's chest. The mountain man's face was a mask of cold fury, and every man there could see that this was not a bluff. Cole Branson would kill without hesitation to protect what was his. "This doesn't concern you, Branson," Jeremiah said, though his voice wavered slightly. "This is a family matter." "The hell it doesn't concern me," Cole said, moving forward with predatory grace. "I paid for them. They're mine. And on my land, I'm the law." "You have no legal right," Stikes began. "Legal right?" Cole's laugh was harsh and humorless. "You want to talk about legal rights? That auction was illegal. Indenture servitude for debt is only legal with a signed contract and court approval, neither of which happened. You sold a woman and her child in what amounts to a slave auction, which has been illegal in this territory for 3 years. He took another step forward, and all 4 men unconsciously backed up. "But let's say we put aside legality. Let's talk about something simpler. 4 of you, 1 of me. But I've lived in these mountains for 20 years. I know every rock, every tree, every shadow. If any of you try to take that woman or her child, I will hunt you down, one by one, and these mountains will become your tomb." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the birds seemed to have stopped singing. Finally, Jeremiah Whitlow found his voice. "You're threatening us?" "No," Cole said softly. "I'm making you a promise." For a long moment, the 2 groups faced each other. Then Vernon Stikes, his face pale, said, "This isn't worth it, Jeremiah. Let's go." "We're not finished." "Yes, we are," Stikes insisted, already mounting his horse. "I didn't come up here to get killed over some baby." The other men followed his lead, mounting quickly. Jeremiah remained a moment longer, his face twisted with impotent rage. "This isn't over," he spat. "Yes, it is," Cole said, his rifle never wavering. "If I see any of you near my land again, I won't give warnings. Now get out." They rode away, the sound of hoofbeats fading into the distance. Only when they were gone did Cole lower his rifle and rush to Mara, who was still on the ground where Stikes had thrown her. "Are you hurt?" His hands were gentle as he helped her up, checking for injuries. "I'm fine," Mara said, though she was shaking. "But they wanted Rose. They were going to take her." Cole's jaw clenched. "No one's taking her. No one's taking either of you, not while I'm breathing." Mara looked up at him, this massive, scarred mountain man who had become her protector, her provider, and somehow, impossibly, her friend. "Why are you doing this? Why do you care so much?" "Because," Cole said, his gray eyes locked on hers, "I already failed to protect one family. I won't fail again." The confrontation at the cabin had consequences. A week later, a marshal arrived from Helena with a summons. The Whitlow family had filed a legal petition for custody of Rose, claiming Mara was an unfit mother. There was to be a hearing in Dry Creek Junction. "I can't go back there," Mara said, panic rising in her chest. "They'll take her from me. They won't," Cole said firmly. "We'll fight this. I have money, and I know a good lawyer in Helena. We'll make this right." The journey back to Dry Creek Junction was tense. Cole had hired Edmund Pierce, a sharp-minded lawyer from Helena, to represent them. Pierce was a small man with keen eyes and a reputation for winning impossible cases. The hearing was held in the town hall, packed with curious onlookers. Mara sat with Rose in her arms, Cole beside her, like a mountain of protective fury. Across the aisle, the Whitlow family sat with their own lawyer, a pompous man named Chester Hargrove. Judge Samuel Morrison, a weathered man in his 60s, called the hearing to order. Hargrove stood first. "Your Honor, this is a simple matter. The child, Rose Whitlow, is the legitimate heir of Thomas Whitlow, deceased. Her paternal grandparents seek custody because the mother, Mara Whitlow, is demonstrably unfit. She lives in unwed cohabitation with a man not her husband in primitive conditions unsuitable for raising a child." "The child is an infant, still nursing," Pierce countered smoothly. "Separating her from her mother at this age would be not only cruel, but potentially fatal. Furthermore, my client's living arrangements are both safe and stable. Mr. Branson has provided for both mother and child admirably." "Provided for them how?" Hargrove sneered. "As what? His servant? His concubine?" Cole started to rise, fury in his eyes, but Pierce placed a restraining hand on his arm and turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I'd like to call Mr. Cole Branson to testify." Cole stood and approached the witness chair, his massive frame making it look like doll furniture. He placed his hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. "Mr. Branson," Pierce began, "please tell the court about your relationship with Miss Whitlow." "I have no relationship with her, in the way they're implying," Cole said bluntly. "I bought her contract at that illegal auction to save her and her baby from being separated. She lives in my cabin because she had nowhere else to go. I sleep downstairs. She sleeps in the loft. She cooks and keeps house. I hunt and provide. That's it." "And why did you do this?" Pierce asked. "Why spend $50, a considerable sum, for strangers?" Cole was quiet for a moment. "Because 22 years ago, I lost my wife and newborn daughter. They died in childbirth, and I couldn't save them. When I saw Miss Whitlow on that auction block, holding her baby, knowing they planned to tear them apart," his voice roughened, "I couldn't let it happen. I couldn't stand by and watch another mother lose her child." The courtroom was silent. Several women in the gallery were wiping their eyes. Hargrove stood for cross-examination, a smirk on his face. "Very touching, Mr. Branson. But tell me, you're a single man living alone in the wilderness. Isn't it true that you have no experience raising children? That you're ill-equipped to provide proper moral guidance?" "I'm not raising the child," Cole said evenly. "Her mother is. I'm just making sure they have a safe place to do it." "A safe place? In the mountains? miles from civilization, from doctors, from proper society. Safer than being in a town that sells women and babies like cattle, Cole shot back, his eyes like ice. Judge Morrison banged his gavel. Mr. Hargrove, if you're going to question the safety of Mr. Branson's home, I suggest you explain why your clients allowed a mother and newborn to nearly starve to death in their own town. Hargrove paled. Your Honor, that's not— Sit down, Mr. Hargrove. Pierce then called Mara to testify. With Rose in her arms, she told her story. Thomas's death, the Whitlows' cruelty, the desperation that had led her to that auction block. She spoke of Cole's kindness, of how he had saved them, protected them, asked nothing in return. Do you wish to remain with Mr. Branson? Pierce asked. Yes, Mara said, her voice steady. He's given us a home. More than that, he's given us a family. When the testimonies were complete, Judge Morrison retired to his chambers. The wait was agonizing. Mara held Rose close, Cole's hand warm and solid on her shoulder. Finally, the judge returned. I've made my decision, Morrison said. The petition for custody is denied. Miss Whitlow retains full parental rights to her daughter. Furthermore, I'm issuing a restraining order against the Whitlow family. They are not to approach Miss Whitlow or her child. Jeremiah Whitlow shot to his feet. This is outrageous. She's living in sin. She's living in safety. Morrison cut him off. Which is more than you provided when you threw a pregnant widow into the streets. This hearing is concluded. The gavel came down with finality. That night, they stayed in a boarding house in town before heading back to the mountains. Rose was asleep in a borrowed cradle, and Mara sat by the window, watching the stars. Cole knocked softly on her door. May I come in? Of course. He entered, looking uncomfortable in the small room, like a bear trying to navigate a dollhouse. He stood there for a moment, clearly struggling with something. Mara, I need to talk to you about something. Her heart began to race. Was he going to send her away now that the legal trouble was over? That lawyer, Pierce, he said something to me after the hearing. He said that the judge was lenient because I'm respectable, a landowner, no criminal record. But he also said that if anyone wanted to cause trouble in the future, the fact that we're living together unwed could be used against you. Oh, Mara said quietly, her stomach sinking. So I've been thinking. Cole ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of nervousness she'd never seen from him before. Maybe we should. That is, it might make sense if we got married. Mara's breath caught. Married? Just on paper, Cole said quickly. Nothing would have to change between us. You'd keep the loft, I'd keep the downstairs. But it would protect you legally. Make sure no one could ever question your fitness as a mother or try to take Rose. Mara looked at him. This man who had saved her, protected her, asked nothing in return. Is that the only reason? She asked softly. Cole's eyes met hers, and for the first time she saw raw emotion there, longing, fear, hope. No, he admitted, it's not. Mara, these past months with you and Rose, they've been the happiest I've had in 20 years. I'm not good with words, and I know I'm too old for you, too rough, too— Stop, Mara interrupted. She stood and walked to him, looking up into his weathered face. Cole, I was married before, to a good man who was young and handsome and everything society said I should want, and I cared for him. But what I feel when I look at you— She placed her hand on his chest, feeling his heart thunder beneath her palm. It's different, stronger. You make me feel safe. You make me feel valued. You look at me and see someone worth protecting, worth caring for, worth loving," Cole finished, his voice barely a whisper. "Because I do, Mara. I love you. I love Rose. I want to be a father to her, a husband to you, not just on paper, but truly, if you'll have me." Tears streamed down Mara's face. "Yes," she said. "Yes, Cole, I'll have you. I love you too." He pulled her into his arms then, carefully, as if she were something precious and fragile. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other, while Rose slept peacefully nearby. They were married a week later by a circuit preacher who came through Dry Creek Junction. It was a simple ceremony, witnessed by Edmund Pierce and his wife, and by old Maggie, the midwife who had helped deliver Rose. Mara wore a simple blue dress that Pierce's wife had helped her buy. Cole wore clean buckskins and had trimmed his beard. When he said, "I do," his voice was strong and sure. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the preacher intoned. "You may kiss your bride." Cole cupped Mara's face in his large, scarred hands and kissed her gently, reverently. It was Mara's first kiss that felt like a promise, like forever. They returned to the mountain cabin as a family, husband, wife, and daughter. That first night as a married couple, Cole hesitantly asked if Mara wanted him to stay downstairs. "No," she said, taking his hand. "I want you with me, with us." They lay together in the loft, Rose sleeping in her cradle beside the bed. Cole held Mara carefully, as if afraid she might break. "I never thought I'd have this again," he whispered into the darkness. "A family, a wife, a child. I thought I'd lost my chance 20 years ago." "We both lost things," Mara said softly. "But maybe we were meant to find each other, to heal each other." "I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you're happy," Cole said. "You and Rose, I swear it." "You already have," Mara said, turning in his arms to face him. "Just by seeing me, really seeing me, not just the fat girl everyone else saw, but me, the person inside." Cole's hand traced her face, her shoulder, her curves. "You're beautiful," he said fiercely. "Every part of you, and anyone who ever made you feel otherwise was a damn fool." Their love-making that night was tender and slow, each of them careful with the other's old wounds. It wasn't passionate fire. It was something deeper, steadier, like two people who had walked through winter and finally found spring. Years passed on the mountain. Rose grew from infant to toddler to little girl, strong and wild as the mountains themselves. Cole taught her to track animals, to read weather signs, to respect the forest. Mara taught her to read and write, to cook and sew, to be kind. 2 years after Rose, Mara gave birth to a son. They named him Thomas, after Mara's first husband, and Cole held the baby with tears streaming down his face. "Another chance," he whispered. "Thank you for giving me another chance." 3 years after Thomas came another daughter, Emma, named for the daughter Cole had lost so long ago. And 2 years after Emma, another son, Samuel. The cabin expanded room by room as the family grew. Cole built an addition, then another. What had once been a lonely hermit shelter became a warm, bustling home filled with laughter and love. They rarely went to town, preferring their mountain sanctuary, but occasionally they would make the journey, and when they did, people would stare at the mountain man and his family, 4 children, all healthy and happy, and a wife who glowed with contentment. Once they encountered Vernon Stikes on the street. The man took one look at Cole's family, Rose, now 7, holding her father's hand, Thomas on Cole's shoulders, baby Emma in Mara's arms, and little Samuel toddling between them, and quickly crossed to the other side of the street. "Papa, who was that man?" Rose asked. "No one important, little one," Cole said, squeezing her hand. "No one important at all." When Rose was 10 years old, a letter arrived. It came via a trapper who sometimes stopped at their cabin, and it bore the seal of a law office in Helena. Jeremiah Whitlow had died. In his will, he had acknowledged Rose as his granddaughter and left her a small inheritance, the original Whitlow homestead and 200 acres of land. "He wanted to make amends," the letter explained. "In his final days he expressed deep regret for his treatment of you and your daughter." Mara read the letter aloud to Cole as they sat by the fire. When she finished, they were both quiet. "What do you want to do?" Cole asked. "I don't know," Mara admitted. "Part of me wants to refuse it, to send it back and say we don't need anything from him. But another part thinks Rose should have what's rightfully hers," Cole finished. "Yes." Cole thought for a moment, then nodded. "Accept it. Not for him, but for her. When she's grown, she can decide what to do with it. Maybe sell it, maybe keep it. But it's hers by blood and by right." So they accepted the inheritance. The land was leased to a farming family, and the income was put into a trust for Rose's future. Years later, when Rose was 18 and preparing to leave for college in Helena, because Cole and Mara had insisted all their children would have education, she asked her father about that day at the auction. "Did you know," she asked, "when you saw Mama on that platform, did you know you would love us?" Cole, now 71 but still strong, considered the question carefully. "I knew I couldn't walk away," he said finally. "I knew that if I did, I'd be letting evil win. As for love, that came later. With your mother's strength and your smile and the way this cabin became a home again instead of just a place to hide from the world." Rose hugged her father tightly. "Thank you for saving us." "No, little one," Cole said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for saving me." Cole Branson lived to be 82 years old. He died peacefully in his sleep, in the cabin he'd built, surrounded by his wife and children, and by then, 7 grandchildren. Mara held his hand as he took his last breath, whispering the same words he'd said to her on their wedding night. "Thank you for seeing me." Mara lived another 10 years after Cole's passing. She stayed in the mountain cabin, cared for by her children, who took turns visiting. She spent her days writing down their story, wanting future generations to know about the mountain man who had defied a cruel world to save a mother and child. When she died, at 79, she was buried next to Cole in a small plot on the mountainside, overlooking the valley. The headstone read, "Cole and Mara Branson. He saved her. She healed him. Together, they built a family from broken pieces." Rose, by then a lawyer like Edmund Pierce, ensured that her parents' story was preserved. She donated her mother's writings to the Montana Historical Society, where they remain to this day. The cabin still stands in the Absaroka Mountains, maintained by the Branson family descendants. It's been designated a historical landmark, a testament to the power of compassion, the strength of love, and the simple truth that Cole Branson spoke on that long-ago day in Dry Creek Junction. No one separates a mother from her child. And in that family, spanning generations, no one ever did.